Welcome to History Sleep-Off, where we drift slowly through the forgotten corridors of time, in search of the quiet truths that history left behind. Tonight, we journey into the ancient forests of India, where myth and memory move like mist between the trees. This is the story of the Vanara, a mysterious race of monkey-like beings who stood beside gods and kings, not merely creatures of legend, but perhaps echoes of something real, something lost. Close your eyes, and let the soft rhythm of the past carry you into a world where the line between man and beast was not so clearly drawn. Let us begin. In the heavy warmth of twilight, when the last light of day seeps gently into the folds of jungle leaves, there is a kind of stillness that asks nothing, yet says everything. It is in this stillness, this space between breath and memory, that the Vanara are said to have once walked. Not as shadows, not as spirits, but as beings of flesh and thought. Monkey-like but not monkeys, men but not quite men. In the stories handed down through the misty corridors of time, they appear as servants of righteousness, companions of gods, builders of bridges, climbers of mountains, and warriors of astonishing might. And yet, what were they? The Ramayana, that ancient Indian epic woven from verse and vision, speaks often of them. It does not speak in riddles, but with the clarity of devotion. To those who know the verses, the Vanaras are real, beings of loyalty and love, courage and sacred duty. They stood beside Lord Rama, not as pets nor as parables, but as comrades. They built with their hands. They thought with strategy. They spoke with wisdom. And most of all, they remembered. It is that remembering which calls to us now, across the dim corridors of the past. Because something in their story, something quiet and persistent, refuses to fade. The forests of ancient India were vast beyond measure, filled with sounds no longer heard and lives no longer known. Within these forests, dense, ancient, alive, there existed a kingdom known as Kishkinda. It is described in the texts not with fantasy, but with precision. It was a place of hills and caves, of lakes like mirrors and trees that touched the sky. A place where the Vanara kings ruled and trained, laughed and lived. Where the stones still held their footprints and the winds carried their songs. To the modern eye, such a tale seems an allegory, a literary device shaped to inspire. And yet, the land remembers in its own quiet way. Even now, in the southern folds of India, there exists a terrain carved by time and sacred memory. Near the Tungabhadra River, the rocks lean into each other like sleeping giants. Temples lie cradled in the crooks of hills. And there, near Hampi, where silence clings to granite like moss, the name Kishkinda is still whispered by wind and prayer alike. It is here many believe the Vanaras lived, not as legends but as people. Perhaps not exactly as told, with fur and tails and divine breath in their chests, but as something ancient, something in between. Could it be that beneath the mythology lies a forgotten people? A forest-dwelling tribe now erased by time, whose memory echoes through metaphor? Or could they have been more? A branch of hominid yet unclassified, or a parallel path of evolution long since folded into dust? These are questions not answered by science alone. They belong to the deeper realm of memory, of myth as archive. The Vanaras, after all, are not told with the tone of invention. Their stories are layered, textured, alive. There is nothing cartoonish about Hanuman, their mightiest warrior. No jest in his devotion, no exaggeration in his virtue. He is spoken of not as animal but as being. His strength is not comical. It is revered. His leap across oceans is not fable. It is miracle. And it is miracle that forms the bridge between our world and theirs. The Ramayana tells us of a bridge, Rama's bridge, built by the Vanaras across the sea to Lanka, the island kingdom of the demon Ravana. They built it not over days but with the urgency of devotion. Stone by stone, thought by thought, they stitched earth to island, carrying boulders upon their backs and faith in their hearts. Today from the sky something remains. A chain of shoals stretching from the southern tip of India to the northern coast of Sri Lanka. A scattering of sandbars and limestone outcrops, known as Adam's Bridge. It lies half submerged in myth, half submerged in water. And still it exists. Geologists may call it a natural formation. Pilgrims may call it sacred proof. Historians may remain uncertain. But the line of it remains, whispering. If the Vanaras were merely metaphors, why does the land reflect their story with such eerie precision? Why does stone still speak where language has long since dissolved? In the silence between question and answer lies the place of this story. We are not here to claim, only to wonder. What were the Vanaras? Were they a lost race? A people clothed in fur and crowned in ancient memory? Were they perhaps misunderstood apes, venerated by early peoples for their uncanny intelligence and courage? Or were they an entirely separate branch, now vanished, remembered only in song? And what of the idea that they were something more? A spiritual bridge between the animal and the divine? A symbol of potential, not just physical but sacred? The jungles of India hold many secrets. Trees grow from temples. Vines clutch statues whose names are no longer known. Carvings peek out from stone, their eyes still open, still watching. In the shadow of banyans older than cities, monkeys gather and chatter. But sometimes one pauses, stills, and looks as though remembering. Perhaps we do not need to find fossils or relics to believe the Vanaras existed. In the way their story is not meant to be confirmed by bone, in the way even now we long to believe in a world where Hanuman with fur and fire once stood side by side with stretches across sea and soul. We begin this journey not with facts but with feeling, with a whisper beneath the banyan tree, with a name spoken not as fable but as friend. Vanara. The name lingers even when the story ends. It sits gently in the dust of temples and the breath of elders. It walks between branches and dreams. It is not lost. It is waiting, waiting for us to sit beside it, to listen, to remember. And so, with heart open and voice hushed, we step forward into the ancient jungles, across the forgotten bridges, through the songs of stone and forest alike. The Vanara are calling, not loudly, not with command, but with patience. And the night is long enough for their story. There are places in the world where the land seems to breathe, not with the movement of air but with something older, something quieter, a breath that comes from memory, from story, from sacred stillness. In the southern folds of India, just along the edges of the Tungabhadra River, there lies such a place. A stretch of hills and stones, of ancient boulders stacked as though by invisible hands, of palm trees swaying beside ancient shrines. It is here many believe that Kishkinda once stood. The Ramayana does not speak of Kishkinda as a fable. It speaks of it as a kingdom, a real place ruled by real beings, a forest domain where the Vanaras lived not as curiosities but as kings. They built with their hands, fought with their hearts, and shaped the destiny of gods and men alike. and even now the land seems to remember. In modern times, the region known as Hampi, a UNESCO heritage site in the state of Karnataka, is filled with stone. Not merely boulders, but formations that feel arranged even though nature insists they were not. Hills with ancient names, caves still whispered into, temples half sunken into the soil. Monkeys still roam the ruins as if searching for something long gone, or waiting. The forests have thinned, but echoes remain. In the rustle of palm leaves, in the distant call of birds, in the spaces where language ends and silence begins. The Ramayana tells us that Kishkinda was a kingdom ruled by two Vanara brothers, Vali and Sugriva. One was strong and proud, the other clever and cautious. Between them lay a rift, and into that rift stepped destiny, wearing the face of exile. When Rama came to Kishkinda in search of his stolen wife, it was Sugriva he befriended. Together they forged an alliance, one of honor, one of loyalty. And from that friendship rose a war not just against evil, but against forgetting. The Vanaras became his army. Not because they were commanded, but because they remembered what it meant to serve something greater than fear. What kind of place produces such beings? The texts speak of caves so vast they housed entire clans, of lakes so still they mirrored the stars, of trees older than kings, of voices that echoed across stone as if the rocks themselves were listening. And they speak too of rituals, of Vanaras gathering under full moons, their chants carried by wind and remembered by soil. And while no historian can date a chant or carbon date a memory, the land itself offers clues. The Anjanadri hill, said to be the birthplace of Hanuman, still rises above the land. Pilgrims climb its 600 steps, not for spectacle but for connection. At the top, amid shrines and sunlight, one can look down upon the landscape of boulders, rivers, and ancient carvings, a kingdom that now sleeps beneath the modern world. Nearby, the Rishimukha hill is said to be the very place where Rama first met Hanuman. It is quiet now. The stones are warm with age. The air moves slowly, but the stillness does not feel empty. Feels inhabited, not by people perhaps, but by something older. Every corner of this land holds a name once spoken in sacred text. Every rock a witness, every temple ruin a heartbeat long paused. Could it be that Kishkinda was not merely a setting for a story, but a memory fossilized in geography? A real kingdom, perhaps not exactly as the Ramayana describes, but close enough to stir something deep? Archaeologists and geologists study the formations here, marveling at the naturally balanced stones, the weather-worn statues, the layers of civilization beneath layers of myth. Some argue the tales are poetic metaphors, shaped by oral tradition. Others are not so sure, because myths don't usually come with maps, or mountains that match, or rivers that curve exactly where the verses say they do. The forests here still teem with life. Langurs leap from branch to branch with practiced grace. Their faces are dark, their eyes intelligent. Sometimes they pause to watch the visitors, not with fear but with a kind of ancestral curiosity, as though somewhere within them they remember being more. The idea that the Vanaras were real, perhaps a now extinct or absorbed branch of ancient hominids, is not as far-fetched as it once sounded. In other parts of the world, fossils of Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbit people, have shown us that human-like beings once existed alongside Homo sapiens, small in stature but capable of tool use and fire. Could ancient India have had its own cousin species? one whose memory was preserved not in bone but in epic? Could Kishkinda have been their domain? Even if the Vanaras were not a separate species, perhaps they were a tribe, a forest-dwelling people who wore animal skins, moved with agility, and displayed traits that early Vedic peoples found remarkable. Over time, their memory may have merged with the symbolism of monkeys, sacred in Hindu culture, revered for their cleverness and energy. And what of Hanuman? The devotee, the warrior, the friend. Was he a man, a metaphor, or something in between? His story is told with such reverence, such detail, such heart, that it feels less like invention and more like tribute. Legends say that Hanuman was born of the wind, that his body was as strong as thunder, that he could leap from one continent to another, that he burned entire cities with a flick of his tail. And yet he was humble, ever loyal, ever devoted. Such stories sound impossible. But impossibility is a modern concept. In ancient times, the line between myth and memory was not a line at all. It was a circle. In that circle, Hanuman lives still, as do the Vanaras, as does Kishkinda. Perhaps Kishkinda was not just a place of geography. Perhaps it was, and is, a place of spirit. A kingdom that dwells wherever loyalty lives, wherever devotion breathes, wherever courage is quiet and steadfast. There are names that and once spoken even as we map its terrain and photograph linger not only in language, we must but also close our eyes in temples, because some places cannot be found on the silent curve of a statue. They must be remembered. Hanuman is one such name. He does not arrive with thunder. He does not call attention to himself. And yet, wherever he is invoked, a certain hush follows. Not of fear, but of reverence, the kind reserved not only for gods, but for those rare souls who become bridges between the mortal and the divine, between myth and memory. Hanuman, the Vanara prince, the servant of Rama, the leaper of oceans, the destroyer of illusion, the healer of wounds, the eternal devotee. But who or what was he? In the pages of the Ramayana, Hanuman emerges not as a curiosity, but as a hero of quiet greatness. His deeds are many, yes. The strength of mountains, the swiftness of wind, the voice that moves both heaven and heart. But it is not his power that defines him. It is his posture. Always bowed in service. Always at the feet of Rama. In a world of kings and warriors, Hanuman is the servant. And yet he towers above them all, not in size but in spirit. Legends say that Hanuman was born of Anjana, a celestial being cursed to live as a Vanara, and Vayu, the wind god. In this lineage he is both divine and earthly, a creature of jungle and sky, a being of fur and flame. His very body becomes metaphor, the animal nature lifted by grace, the earthly made sacred by humility. And yet in every account there is detail, texture, description, as though the storytellers were not inventing him but remembering him. Could it be that Hanuman was not only myth, that he was a memory passed from mouth to mouth, shaped over time not by fiction but by awe? Across the lands of India his image is everywhere, in roadside shrines, in grand temples, in amulets and prayer beads. He is not feared but called upon, especially in times of danger, uncertainty, or weakness. He is strength not of conquest but of protection, devotion not as submission but as clarity. To scholars, Hanuman is an archetype, the loyal servant, the perfected devotee, the union of might and humility. But to villagers, monks, and pilgrims he is something else entirely. He is real, There are stories told not in books but around firelight, of people who saw him in the forest, a flash of red cloth and fur watching from the trees, of dreams where he speaks not in words but in presence, of footprints found in caves too high for man to reach. To dismiss these as fantasy is easy, but to sit with them, gently, patiently, is to sense something deeper. A resonance. What if Hanuman was once a being, not exactly as the tales describe but close enough to inspire them? Perhaps a member of a tribe long gone, remembered for his strength, his compassion, his strange appearance. Or perhaps a sage, a mystic who wore the garb of forest and fur to walk among animals, to live as they did, to teach without speaking. There are traditions in India of sadhus, holy men, who imitate Hanuman not as costume but as path. They paint their faces, grow their hair wild, move through the forests like whispers. Not pretending but becoming. To them Hanuman is not a character. He is the breath beneath the silence, the spark within the stillness. And if such imitation brings peace, wisdom, and insight, then is it truly imitation, or is it remembrance? The stories of Hanuman are vast, but one moment stands above them all: the leap to Lanka. Sita, Rama's beloved, had been taken by Ravana, the demon king, and held captive across the ocean. Rama wept, not with weakness but with love. And in that moment Hanuman stepped forward. He did not wait for a plan. He did not ask for praise. He simply knelt, took Rama's ring, and leapt. He leapt across an ocean, not as a god, not as a warrior, but as a servant, a friend. The image of that leap, one figure soaring across blue waters, silhouetted against a full moon, is more than art. It is meditation, a reminder that faith, when pure, becomes power. And when Hanuman reached Lanka, he did not bring war. He brought a message, a memory, a seed of hope planted in a garden of despair. That seed would grow into victory, but it began in silence, in humility, in devotion. This is why Hanuman is loved. Not because he fought, but because he remembered who he was, what he served, what mattered. And perhaps that remembering is not confined to epics. In ancient temples carved into stone, deep within forests no longer traveled, there are depictions of beings with monkey-like faces, seated in posture of meditation, their eyes closed, their hands folded, not fierce but serene. Archaeologists might call them artistic interpretations, symbolic hybrids, but perhaps they are something else, echoes, portraits not of imagined beings but of remembered ones. What if, long before writing, long before formal religion, there existed a being who walked between forest and fire? A being who healed, who served, who carried wisdom in his silence. A being who became not myth, but memory shaped in the clay of devotion? And what if Hanuman is not just one name, but the preserved identity of an entire kind? The last flicker of a lineage long extinguished, living on not in bone but in belief? The Vanaras were many, but Hanuman is the one remembered. Not because he was the strongest, but because he became the most human. His tale may be long, his strength may be vast, but it is his heart that we follow. In times of struggle his name is whispered. In times of danger his image is drawn. In times of doubt his story is told, not as escape, but as reminder, that within each of us lives the possibility to leap, to serve, to remember. Hanuman, the wind-born, the bridge walker, the fire bringer, the one who bowed before no throne save love. His temples stand in every corner of India. There are places where the land ends, the quiet ocean begins, the breath before where the horizon is not just the silence but before action. And in that shimmering veil between the known and not the imagined, not to be worshipped, but between what was and what might have been. One such place lies between the southern tip of India and the northern edge of Sri Lanka. Here, beneath the blue expanse of the Pak Strait, lies a chain of limestone shoals, stretching nearly 30 kilometers across the water. From above, from the silent eye of satellites, it appears like a forgotten road, broken, half-submerged, almost hidden beneath waves and time. To many, this is no ordinary formation. To the devotees of Rama, this is Ram Setu, the bridge built by the Vanaras. Not a metaphor, not a symbol, but a memory carved in stone. The Ramayana tells the story softly. Rama, exiled prince and incarnation of Vishnu, stood at the edge of the sea, gazing toward Lanka, where his beloved Sita was held captive by Ravana, the demon king. The ocean spread before him, vast and untamed, and it was then that the Vanara stepped forward. Under the guidance of Nala, an architect among them, they began to build. Not with machines, not with technology as we know it, but with faith, with stone, and with hands that remembered a different age. Mountains were carried, trees felled, stones engraved with Rama's name were laid upon the water, and they floated. So says the tale. And one by one the Vanaras placed them until a path emerged across the sea. A path not just of stone, but of devotion. A path that led Rama to his destiny. And there, in the quiet gap between continents, that path remains. Modern scientists call it Adam's Bridge, a natural formation, a sandbar, a coral reef, an accident of geology. But not everyone is convinced. Satellite imagery has revealed straight lines, uniform widths, and a certain rhythm to the structure, as though it were planned, not placed by chance. Some believe it is man-made. Others, a blend of natural and human forces. Still others, a myth etched into Earth's memory. But whether natural or built, it is the memory that matters. Because every culture has stories, but few have stories that can still be seen. Even now, in the soft morning light, fishermen speak of strange stillness along the shoals, of waters that move differently there, of stones that echo when touched, of birds that linger longer on those edges. The tale of the bridge is not a loud one. It does not shout. It hums. It hums with the rhythm of devotion, of 1,000 beings working not for glory but for love, for Rama, for Sita, for the promise that good must reach across to confront evil no matter how wide the ocean. The Vanaras in this story are not mere laborers. They are participants in something sacred. They build not just with strength, but with remembrance, as if within their bodies they held the memory of older things, the secrets of earth and stone. What kind of beings could build such a thing? The Ramayana describes Vanaras carrying boulders like pebbles, forming chains across waters, moving with the precision of ancient engineers. Were these exaggerations? Or were they echoes? There is a theory whispered among those who peer gently into the past, that the Vanaras were not just mythic primates, but descendants of a forgotten lineage, beings who once walked the earth with knowledge now lost, with rituals now misunderstood. Perhaps the bridge was their offering not just to Rama but to time itself. A way to leave behind a trace. A line drawn gently across history's waters. And what of the stones that floated? A curious part of the story often dismissed as fancy. And yet, in the sands of India there are stones, porous, volcanic, that can float. Not forever. Not easily. But long enough to make one pause. And in that pause the story breathes. Because sometimes, when you listen without urgency, when you allow stillness to lead, you find that the line between possible and impossible is thinner than you thought. The building of Rama's bridge is not just a tale of engineering. It is a meditation, a lesson. It teaches that even oceans can be crossed, not with pride but with purpose. That even the smallest being, the humblest Vanara, can become part of something eternal. And perhaps that is why the bridge endures. In stone, in sky, in the slow rhythm of tide. Pilgrims visit the shores of Dhanishkodi, the point where the bridge once began. They walk its sands, gaze out across the shimmering blue, and offer prayers not to stone but to memory. To the belief that the past still walks beside us. That somewhere, beneath the waves, the footsteps of Vanaras remain. Rama's bridge is not loud. It does not demand belief. It simply is. Waiting. Whispering. And if you stand quietly at the water's edge, if you let the breeze carry you backward, not in time but in feeling, you may hear the echo of labor. The soft thud of stone on water. The murmur of Vanaras chanting Rama's name. The bridge rising not from ground but from devotion. A path not just across the sea but across forgetting. So much of the modern world moves quickly, loudly. It forgets to remember. But the bridge remembers. It remembers the hands that built it. The heart that walked it. The love that leapt across it. Hanuman's leap to Lanka. Some memories are not kept in words, but in walls. But it was the bridge that in the quiet curves of a cave, built not by God, but by those who served them. The weathered mouth service they became something spoken in 1,000 years. In places where footsteps once fell, barefoot, deliberate, purposeful, and then vanished, leaving only silence behind. And yet that silence remembers. The jungles of southern India are thick with vines and roots. Trees older than dynasties press close together, their branches like folded hands above the moss-covered earth. Deep within these forests are caves, and within those caves paintings. Not many, not loud, but present. On the rough stone walls of places like the Bhimbetka rock shelters, there are figures drawn in ochre and ash, humans with elongated limbs, strange animal faces, dancing beside monkeys hunting with spears. Some scholars see these as early attempts at storytelling, others as symbolic representations of the world as it was once seen, a blend of man and nature, dream and daylight. But there are a few who wonder something else. What if these were not symbols but sketches of what truly was? Not fantasy but memory? In the heartlands of Karnataka, near Hampi, stand the broken remains of a kingdom said to have once belonged to the Vanaras. The ancient city of Kishkinda, mentioned in the Ramayana, is said to have been here, carved not just in stone but into the very bones of the hills. Winds blow gently through its deserted courtyards, as if still carrying whispers of war cries or laughter or chant. Temples here are etched with monkey-faced beings, not crude but regal. Beings who sit upon thrones or kneel in prayer, their faces tilted upward not in rage but reverence. Could these have been more than artistic flourishes? Could they be portraits of those who came before? Beings of flesh and fur, remembered long after their bones returned to the earth? We know from paleontology that many species of early hominids once walked these lands. Gigantopithecus, a massive ape-like creature, once roamed the forests of ancient India and Southeast Asia. Standing perhaps 10 feet tall, it vanished from the fossil record tens of thousands of years ago. Most believe it died out, unable to adapt. But some ask, what if it did not vanish but simply faded into story? What if the Vanara, remembered as monkey men, were descendants of such a lineage, more intelligent than assumed, more advanced than we have allowed ourselves to imagine? In the Ajanta and Ellora caves of Maharashtra, sacred spaces carved deep into volcanic rock, we see the evolution of devotion. Buddhist monks chiseled shrines and sculptures over centuries, creating chambers filled with light and silence. Among the many reliefs and carvings are faces, not just of deities, but of figures with non-human features. Some are explained, others left unnamed. In one niche, a kneeling figure bows before a flame. Its hands are delicate, but its face, vaguely simian, elongated, alert, watches not the flame but beyond it. Art historians say such faces are simply decorative, metaphorical perhaps. But what if they are something else? What if these quiet corners remember something the texts have forgotten? The Vanara were not just described in stories. They were located. Kishkinda was said to be their home, a real place, not an abstract heaven. And if we accept the setting as real, why not those who lived within it? Even the Ramayana does not always treat the Vanara as wholly mythical. They strategize. They organize. They build bridges. They offer allegiance. They hold councils and titles. No mere beasts. And if these beings once existed, walking upright, living in bands, organizing under kings like Sugriva and Vali, then perhaps they left more behind than stories. Perhaps they left traces in the stone, not in grandeur but in gesture. In the forests of Sri Lanka, cave temples like Ravana hold legends that the demon king himself once dwelled within them, but nearby villages whisper of others. Of beings with fur, with long tails, with faces too human to be monkey, too monkey to be man. Children are told to be respectful at the forest's edge. Not out of fear, but because the old ones may still walk there. Quiet, watching, waiting. In Indonesia, cave art found in Sulawesi depicts strange humanoid animal hybrids hunting wild boars, thousands of years before written language. In Cambodia, the temples of Angkor Wat and Preah Vihear depict mythological battles between monkey warriors and demons, engraved with such precision it feels more like memory than imagination. Were these stories spreading outward? Or were they echoing inward, remembered fragments of something once known across lands now divided by forest, by sea, by time? Archaeology moves slowly, carefully, but memory sometimes moves in spirals. It hides in plain sight, waiting not for proof but for pause. There are stories told by tribal elders in parts of central India, the Baiga, the Gond, the Santal, of a time when there were two kinds of people, those who walked fully upright and those who bent slightly forward, moved through trees and spoke in whistles and clicks. These forest dwellers, they say, helped build shelters, taught how to find herbs, and then disappeared, not in death but in retreat. They were not gods, but they were not quite human either. They were remembered not in fear but with gratitude. And so the question lingers, Could there have been a race, or perhaps many races, of beings who shared the world with early humans? Beings that were different, perhaps physically, perhaps spiritually. Beings that eventually faded as humanity spread, wrote, claimed, and forgot. Such beings once existed. If the Vanara are more than metaphor, then where are their bones? Where are their homes? The answer may be hidden beneath centuries of forest. It is a whisper, buried beneath structures only to be heard by later empires, and even if dissolved no bones in soil long turned to silt. But sometimes the absence of evidence is not silence. Often carry a truth that science has yet to name. Perhaps the Vanaras did not vanish. Perhaps they were remembered, not perfectly but lovingly. Turned into gods, into protectors, into carved figures holding lamps at temple gates. Stone does not speak loudly, but if you press your hand to it, if you close your eyes, it hums. It hums with hands that shaped it, with breaths that pass through its chambers, with the silent footfalls of those who came before. And perhaps if we listen long enough, not just with ears but with stillness, we may hear them again. The world is vast and ancient, layered deep with stories whispered across millennia. Beneath the great forests and rolling hills, beneath the temples weathered by rain and sun, lie echoes of beings who once walked the earth. Their presence lingers like a faint breeze, a soft murmur carried through time, heard only by those who listen without hurry, without expectation. Among these echoes are the Vanaras, the monkey men of the Ramayana, whose story has survived the centuries not with loud proclamations but with gentle persistence. They exist not only in the grand tales of heroic battles and divine missions but in the quiet corners of villages, in the folds of ancient forests, and in the hearts of those who remember. The Vanaras were not mere beasts. They were creatures of intelligence, courage, and profound loyalty. Their leader, Hanuman, embodies these virtues and is worshipped not only as a god of power but as a symbol of wisdom and selfless devotion. Across India and beyond, his figure stands as a reminder of the sacred connection between the divine and the earthly, between man and nature. Yet the legacy of the Vanara goes beyond religion and myth. It extends into the very fabric of what it means to be human, and perhaps more than human. Modern anthropology and genetics reveal a complex story of our ancestors, one where many hominid species once shared the earth. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and others now lost to time contribute to our genetic makeup. It is a tale not of isolation but of coexistence and intermingling. Could the Vanaras be the whispers of this deep history, the memories of a time when human-like beings of varied forms and abilities lived alongside our ancestors? Might these stories preserve, in mythic form, a reality of ancient diversity that modern science is only beginning to uncover? The thought invites a quiet reflection, encouraging us to view mythology not as mere fantasy but as a vessel carrying fragments of forgotten truths. It asks us to honor stories as living connections to the past, to appreciate the richness and complexity of our origins. Walking through the forests that stretch over southern India, one might still feel the presence of the Vanara in the rustling leaves and the calls of wild creatures. The landscape itself seems to hold memories, the air thick with stories waiting to be heard. The ruins of Kishkinda and other sacred sites are not just relics but testimonies of a world where myth and reality blend softly. The temples carved in stone reveal faces that blur the line between human and simian, suggesting reverence for beings who may have been seen as intermediaries between the natural and spiritual realms. The very architecture, in its careful balance of strength and grace, reflects a worldview where the sacred and the earthly intertwine. In the quiet rituals of villagers, the stories of the Vanara are kept alive. Children listen to tales of bravery and devotion, their imaginations kindled by visions of a world where gods and beasts walked side by side. These stories, passed down through generations, shape identities and values, weaving the past into the present. The Vanara legacy is also a call to acknowledge the wildness within ourselves. It reminds us that humanity is not defined solely by reason and civilization, but also by instinct, empathy, and connection to the natural world. Hanuman's strength and humility teach us about balance, courage without pride, and service without expectation. This ancient narrative encourages a deeper understanding of our place in the world, not as conquerors but as participants in a vast living web. It invites us to listen to the earth, to respect the creatures with whom we share it, and to remember that our story is intertwined with theirs. Science, too, is beginning to uncover clues that align with these ancient stories. Fossil discoveries reveal the existence of large hominids like Gigantopithecus, whose size and habitat overlap with the regions associated with the Vanaras. While much remains unknown, the possibility that these beings contributed to human legend is a humbling reminder of how much remains hidden beneath the surface of history. The mysteries of DNA and paleontology suggest that our past is not linear but layered, filled with interactions and shared histories. The Vanara tale may be one of the many strands woven into this intricate tapestry. This enduring legacy teaches patience and humility. It reminds us that understanding the full story of humanity requires more than facts. It demands openness to wonder and reverence for the stories that survive, not because they were fully understood but because they touched something deep within the human spirit. As the sun sets and the jungle settles much about night, remembering as the whispers of the Vanara echo softly. The Vanara invite us to embrace the mystery. They remind us that some truths are not told with words, to hold but space for stories that stretch beyond time. Stories that connect us to the wild, to the divine, and to each other. Their legacy is not only in the grand epics or the carved stones but in the quiet moments of reflection and wonder. It is in the soft murmur of memory and the enduring hope that even the oldest stories have something vital to teach us. And so the Vanara remain, not lost but always near, their whispers carried on the wind, waiting for those who will listen with stillness and respect. The stories we tell softly at night or in quiet gatherings are more than just entertainment. They are vessels, carrying the weight of memory, the shimmer of possibility, and the faint traces of truth. The Vanaras, the monkey men of the Ramayana, live in that sacred space between myth and memory. They are creatures born of imagination and experience, of spirit and flesh intertwined. Their tales have passed through countless generations, folded into song and scripture, carved into stone and whispered beneath the canopy of ancient forests. But what is the nature of these stories? Are they merely allegories, symbols created to teach lessons of loyalty, courage, and devotion? Or could they be the echoes of something deeper, fragments of a collective memory reaching across time? Throughout human history, Myths have often served as bridges between the known and the unknown, the seen and the unseen. They allow us to explore questions too vast or complex for simple answers. What does it mean to be human? What is our connection to nature? To the divine? The Vanara narrative captures these themes with subtle grace. These beings are both animal and godlike, wild yet wise. Their story challenges binary thinking and invites us to embrace complexity. Within the Ramayana, the Vanaras act not only as warriors but as community builders, strategists, and loyal companions. They embody traits we value: strength tempered by humility, intelligence paired with devotion. Their leader, Hanuman, is perhaps the greatest symbol of this balance. He is a creature of immense power who moves quietly through the world, guided by love and purpose rather than pride or rage. In this way, the Vanara myth teaches us about the integration of our own nature: the wild and the civilized, the instinctual and the rational. On a deeper level, the Vanaras may also represent a form of ancestral memory, a remembrance of earlier forms of life that coexisted alongside human ancestors. The fossil record shows a complex history of human evolution, with many branches that have come and gone. Some of these hominids likely possessed qualities that inspired stories like those of the Vanara, beings intelligent and social, yet physically different from modern humans. The idea that the Vanara are descendants of such beings invites us to consider how memory and myth evolve together. Stories passed down orally can preserve kernels of truth, even as details shift and meanings transform. What begins as a record of real encounters can become mythologized, layered with spiritual meaning. In this way, the Vanara saga may be a palimpsest, a text overwritten many times, with each generation adding its own interpretations, hopes, and fears. This layered storytelling enriches the narrative rather than diminishes its value. It shows how human consciousness works, weaving together fact and fiction, history and dream, to make sense of our place in the world. The Vanara, then, are more than characters in a story. They are symbols of our ongoing dialogue with the past and with ourselves. They remind us that identity is not fixed but fluid, shaped by the stories we tell and the truths we seek. They invite us to explore our relationship to nature and to each other, encouraging a humility born of recognition that we are part of a much larger whole. Across cultures and time, the figure of the monkey or ape has held special significance. In Chinese tradition, the Monkey King Sun Wukong is a trickster and hero, embodying cleverness and resilience. In African folklore, similar figures appear, embodying wisdom and mischief. These parallels suggest a shared human fascination with beings who blur boundaries, who move between worlds. The Vanaras fit into this pattern, standing at the crossroads of myth and memory, animal and human, past and present. Their story is one of connection, between species, between worlds, between the tangible and the intangible. As we listen to these tales today, in quiet moments before sleep or in reflective solitude, we participate in a long tradition of storytelling that shapes our understanding of existence. The Vanara remind us that sometimes the most profound truths are found not in clear answers, but in the spaces between, in the questions, the doubts, and the wonder. They call us to remember that humanity is vast and varied, shaped by many influences both seen and unseen. In the quiet moments in honoring their story, we honor a part of ourselves, still cloaked in shadow, the wildness within the spark of life begin to awaken. In the enduring quest to know who we truly are. In the air. It is in these moments that the past feels closest, and the veils between memory and myth grow thin. The story of the Vanara, the monkey men who once stood beside heroes in ancient epics, continues to ripple softly through the fabric of time. Their legacy is not confined to the pages of the Ramayana or the worn stones of forgotten temples. It lives quietly, woven into the rhythms of the natural world, the heartbeat of forests, and the collective memory of peoples who still honor their presence. The Vanara remind us that history is not only what is written but what is remembered. Sometimes in dreams, sometimes in rituals, and often in the gentle spaces between spoken words. To walk the forests of southern India, or to listen to the songs and stories shared by those who dwell close to nature, is to sense this lingering presence. It is a presence that calls not for proof or spectacle but for reverence and contemplation. Their story invites us to consider the boundaries of human identity. What does it mean to be human? Is it simply a matter of biology, or is there something deeper that connects us to the wider tapestry of life? The Vanara blur these lines, reminding us that intelligence, spirit, and community transcend simple categories. In worship and art, Hanuman is more than a figure of strength. He is a symbol of devotion, courage, and humility. These qualities resonate universally, transcending religious and cultural boundaries. His image, strong yet gentle, fierce yet compassionate, offers a mirror for our own inner struggles and aspirations. But beyond the spiritual and symbolic, there is the tantalizing possibility that the Vanara are echoes of a reality once shared. Scientific discoveries have revealed that the story of human origins is far from simple. Rather than a single linear path, it is a complex web of interwoven species, cultures, and encounters. Fossils such as those of Gigantopithecus, a giant ape species that lived in Asia until tens of thousands of years ago, offer a glimpse into this diverse past. Could beings like Gigantopithecus have inspired stories of the Vanara? Or might descendants of such hominids have lived alongside early humans, influencing culture and myth? While definitive answers remain elusive, these questions enrich our understanding of history as a living, evolving narrative. The idea of lost tribes, of forgotten peoples remembered only in legend, invites us to embrace mystery rather than fear it. It encourages humility in the face of the vast unknown, reminding us that our knowledge is always partial, our perspective limited. The Vanara narrative thus serves as a bridge, connecting the scientific with the spiritual, the historical with the mythical. It encourages dialogue between disciplines and cultures, fostering a richer, more nuanced appreciation of our shared heritage. In the modern world, where rapid change and technological advancement often distance us from nature and tradition, the Vanaras story offers grounding. It calls us back to the forest, to the rhythms of the earth, and to the wisdom carried in story and song. Communities that continue to honor Hanuman and the Vanara do so not only out of faith but as an act of cultural memory, preserving ties to ancestral ways of life and understanding. Their celebrations, festivals, and rituals echo the deep connections between people, place, and history. Beyond India, the figure of the monkey or ape continues to inspire imagination and reverence. From the trickster Sun Wukong in Chinese folklore to ape deities and spirits in African and indigenous American traditions, the archetype resonates universally. This suggests that the themes embodied by the Vanara, of liminality, transformation, and connection, are fundamental to the human psyche. Psychologists and anthropologists have explored how such archetypes function, serving as symbols that help individuals and communities navigate the complexities of existence. The Vanara, in this light, are not merely characters in ancient stories but living symbols, guiding us through the mysteries of identity, belonging, and transcendence. Their story encourages us to embrace the parts of ourselves that are wild and free, that question and challenge, that love and serve. It invites reflection on the nature of devotion, the power of loyalty, and the courage to face the unknown. As we move through life, often separated from nature and tradition by the noise of modernity, the Vanara call us to remember. To remember that we are part of something greater, a vast, interconnected web of life and story. To remember that the past is not distant but present, alive in the soil beneath our feet, the trees around us, and the breath within. The legacy of the Vanara, like all great myths, is an invitation. An invitation to listen deeply, to look beyond the surface, and to honor the mysteries that shape our world. In their tale we find both history and hope, a reminder that even as time flows endlessly forward, the stories we carry shape who we are and who we may yet become.